You're listening to the Practical Living Podcast with Doreen Rainey, where we focus on purpose, peace, and prosperity. Our goal is to support you in applying the teachings of Christ in your everyday life. Welcome to episode 18 of Practical Living. I am Doreen, and today we are actually going to have part 2 of our conversation around build. On yesterday's episode, I gave you kind of the definition of build, what it means to erect, construct, and then we also looked at a scripture that kind of reflected on what are the traits and characteristics of someone who is building towards the life that God has called them and created them to have and to be. So I want to continue on a little bit around that scripture, which was Luke chapter 6, verses 47 through 49. And it says, I will show you what it's like when someone comes to me, listens to my teaching, and then follows it. It is like a person building a house who digs deep and lays the foundation on solid rock. When the floodwaters rise and break against that house, it stands firm because it is well built. But anyone who hears and doesn't obey is like a person who builds a house right on the ground without a foundation. When the flood sweeps down against that house, it will collapse into a heap of ruins. And so in the previous episode, we looked at what it means to come to him, listen to his teachings, and then follow. But I want to take a little bit more of a deeper dive to explore what foundation do you have when it comes to your faith. And it's very easy for people to say, oh, I have faith, I believe, I pray. But what I have found is that when you have something rise and break against you, and I love this scripture because it doesn't say if the flood waters rise and break against, it says when. And so it's very clear that even as a Christian, even as a follower of Christ, that we will have circumstances, situations, people rise and break against us. And the way you test whether you have built your faith on a solid foundation is what is your default when something rises and breaks against you? Do you allow worry and anxiety and despair to take over? Do you start looking for people or situations and circumstances where you can place blame and become angry and bitter? Do you find that your default is to immediately go into your flesh action and try to fix things and try to make things happen or fix it yourself? If you have a solid foundation based on following him, his teachings, and his actions, then your default leans toward the solid foundation of prayer, of meditation, of listening for his word, of staying calm. Because it's in that space that you can actually truly hear what your next step should be. It's in that space that you can begin to have clarity about what actions you should do in this situation or circumstance. Because he makes it really clear in this scripture that when we have something rise and break against us, that we need to obey what we hear from him in order to deal with that situation. So if you aren't hearing from him, then you need to get to a place with prayer, meditation, his word, that allows you to hear what it is you should do in this situation. But then that's not the end of it. Then he says you must obey what you hear. And I think for many people, this is where the challenge comes in. Because even when they know in their heart what they're supposed to do when it comes to this decision, what they're supposed to do when it comes to this financial situation, what they're supposed to do when it comes to managing a conflict with a person or staying or leaving your job or dealing with something in business, when it comes to the challenges, and you do take a step back and you do pray and you do ask for answers, and then he gives it to you, then you have to be bold and courageous enough to act on what you heard him say. And there are times when what you hear, hey, I'm down, I'm with it, I'm going to do it. And then there are times when you hear and what you're being asked to do is challenging. What you're being asked to do may cause conflict or friction. But it's only in the obedience that your house will stand. And it's in the disobedience that your foundation is subject to be flawed. So I hope that you have enjoyed this extra bonus part 2 episode around build. And it's my hope, and I'm continually working on this as well, to make sure that everything we do aligns with building a solid foundation, that we continue to listen and we also act on what we hear. Thank you for listening to this episode of Practical Living. You can connect with us on Instagram at Practical Living Ministries and on our website at practicallivingministries.org.